I'll start with what's called Agenda 21. And if you haven't heard this term before, this isn't actually like a conspiratorial term, like made up by people who think something is in the works kind of thing. This is actually like the official name by the United Nations. So Agenda 21, if you look it up, you'll see that it is, quote, an action plan of the United Nations with regard to sustainable development. So it's a real agenda. This is what they actually call it. And then it's further defined as an action agenda for the United Nations, other multilateral organizations, and individual governments around the world that can be executed at the local, national, and global level, end quote. So there's a lot, obviously, that's included in this agenda, but what I just wanted to talk about in particular is the push towards what they're calling, green cities or smart cities, and why this isn't actually a great idea, even though it's being presented as such. So there's just been so many articles and, news reports, etc., just pushing this idea in advertisements, talking about, the new future green smart city. And I'm looking at an article that I took out of a current environmental magazine, and it shows this like city center, very dense, city blocks with buildings, but with, lots of trees added. And that's basically, the upgrade. There's a few more green spaces, there's more trees, and there's many solar panels on top of the buildings. So this is, the kind of pretty picture that's being tried to convince you that it's such a great thing. But I'm not saying that more trees and green spaces and solar panels are a bad thing, not at all. But what I am saying is a bad thing is the control that goes along with these seemingly, innocuous, positive upgrades, right? It's not just a matter of adding more solar panels and planting more trees. There's nothing really wrong with that at all, especially the planting trees. So what I'm referring to is what gets mentioned in passing concerning Agenda 21 and these other, similar local and national level agendas, which is that you won't have the option to do otherwise, right? These new environmental solutions, quote unquote, are going to be implemented in a mandatory fashion. So even in this article, just like I mentioned, the classic move is just to slip it in passing. The quote here is, in a future where climate disruption is taken seriously, it won't be an option to build without using those tools. So the tools that they're referring to are, these various upgrades, but also restrictions on land access in particular. And that's really, I think, the most important part of it that is talked about probably the least. So why do I think that restricting land access is such a bad thing? Because, as I explain in my essays, The Right Revolution and The Root in Justice, the most sustainable and ethical way for people to live on the planet is actually via voluntary communities, voluntary gift economy of communities, of sovereign veganic homesteads. So veganic just means vegan and organic. So it means a homestead where you're not enslaving, killing animals, and where you're not using toxic chemicals, right? So no violence towards animals, and then no violence towards the community, yourself, and and the environment by using toxic chemicals. So just you could just say a non-violent homestead is basically why the term veganic is the correct one. If you can just stick to a position of nonviolence, that would just naturally lead you to leaving animals alone, and that would naturally lead you to leaving toxic chemicals alone. It's just a common sense thing to do. It's just what being nonviolent is in those two areas. Okay, so the sovereign part of it, sovereign veganic homesteads, means that everybody on the earth would have homesteading, land, water, and seed considered a birthright, because those were not created by man. Those are pre-existing here in nature. I believe created by God, but whether you believe in God or not, it certainly wasn't created by man. And so a fair share of it should be considered a birthright of everyone. No one should have to pay other people for that, because, number one, like I said, they're pre-existing, not created by man. But number two, they're necessities of life, right? So it's different than, say, someone who digs, 10 years and then finds a bunch of gold. Well, no, then sure, that gold is theirs, right? They did the hard work to procure that gold, and if they want to then sell it, okay. Gold is not a basic necessity of life, right? So food, clothing, shelter, right? These are all necessities, right? We need food, we need water, we need a place to rest, we need shelter, we need some clothing, usually if we're not in a tropical environment. And these are all provided by the earth, all provided by land, water, and seed, right? The seed is used to not only grow vegetables and fruit and nut trees, but also trees and industrial hemp and things that we can use to create shelter and clothing, right? So land, water, and seed, and of course the air that we breathe and the sunshine, provide us with the basic necessities of life, right? So if someone were to monopolize all those, all the land, all the water, all the seed, and then coerce people through that control to obey them, that's unethical, right? They don't have any real right to do that. So if sovereign veganic homesteads are the ultimate solution, then this smart city is basically the complete opposite, right? On a sovereign homestead, you would be in control, right? It's sovereign, meaning you're the king of that homestead, or you're the queen of that homestead. That, 1 hectare or acre and a half of land that you would need to be mostly self-sufficient in your community there, would not be under the control of anyone else. You wouldn't be renting it from the state, paying property taxes. You wouldn't be subject to rulership of any kind. You would be the ruler of that homestead, right? So that's sovereign. You're a free individual on that land. Okay, so free, sovereign individual on a piece of land in nature, right? Versus citizen in smart city, right? They're actually opposites, right? Because what they're proposing at the smart city is basically you have no sovereignty, right? Your whole life is being micromanaged. You're told that you don't even have the right to use land. Everything is regulated, from the transportation you use to the fuel you use, everything. And then micromanagement just compounds, just exponentially increasing, and all in the name of safety, of course, all in the name of a better world. Because supposedly you can't be trusted to just live on the planet in a sustainable way, even though the most sustainable way would be on a veganic homestead, but you are actually prevented from living that way because you're denied your birthright. It's economically impossible for the majority of people to live full-time on a homestead, at a home on a piece of land where they're, working at their vegetable garden and orchard full-time. That's not economically possible or politically possible, right? Because if you were to be able to do that full-time also, you would not be concerned with property taxes, right? Most people, even if they afford the land, maybe they still can't work the land constantly because they have to earn money to pay the property taxes, right? Or pay inspection fees or whatever other government, regulation and requirement or extortion is taking place. So the most sustainable and ethical way to live has actually been made illegal. And the smart city agenda is just furthering that wrong direction, intensifying it by putting you in this control grid on a city where you're even more controlled, you're even less self-sufficient, right? So how does this relate to conspiracy theory number 2? Conspiracy theory number 2 is that this whole medical mandate push over this past year has not been just for the wish of making the world a better and safer, healthier place. It's actually been mainly concerned with, again, making the powers that be even more powerful and making you more disempowered, less self-sufficient, and even less healthy. So the particular part that I just want to focus on here is how advertising is used to push this idea that medical mandates are legitimate, that you don't actually control your own body, and that it's legitimate for the state to initiate a preemptive attack against you by controlling your body, by coercing you to use a medical device or take a medical treatment against your will in the name of safety. And what I've noticed that I believe is certainly true, but I agree does qualify as a conspiracy theory. But again, not all conspiracy theories are irrational and nonsensical. My theory is that the reason why you have been seeing advertisements all over the place, billboards, TV ads, ads on social media, constantly showing you people wearing masks, to the point where I think it's safe to say most people have no idea what the advertisement is even for, meaning like whatever the corporation is selling, it's not even made clear, and it's not even like when you just glance at the billboard or you see this video briefly, that's not actually what a product being sold is, not actually the main intention of the advertisement. The main intention is just to present you with these individuals with masks on, just to blast your blast your attention, your awareness one more time with here's people wearing masks, here's people wearing masks in various settings, right? So on billboards, it'll be a group of nurses, or it'll just be a group of people in all varying scenarios. It's just to show you people wearing masks constantly, every day. That's just coming at you on a daily basis from multiple avenues. And this even goes deeper, where it's not even necessarily showing you the visual, but it's talking about the mask wearing as if it was just totally normal and legitimate. And this goes, it's amazing just how ubiquitous and how far-reaching they've gone with getting this message, getting this conditioning out there, where even on restaurant review sites, I found that, if you were about to write a review for a restaurant, there's a text box, and in the text box, before you start typing, there's some suggested writing, there's some suggested text in there to kind of, supposedly just give you an idea of what would be a nice review to write. And these suggested reviews started out with saying, oh, I was so happy that this restaurant insisted on people wearing masks. You know, it's like, even there is coming at you, even in like, 50% gray text in a box that you're about to type a review in. So it's just coming at you from all sides. And why would that be an agenda? Why would anyone want to purposely push this normality, this idea that, oh, wearing the mask is a good and safe thing. Everybody's doing it, so just get, it's totally cool, totally normal, nothing odd going on here, is because fundamentally, it's not just a mask at all. It's a medical mandate. And this is unprecedented, and it's actually tyrannical. And if you accept that, you've then given up what sovereignty you had left, basically. A good chunk of what sovereignty you had left, along with what power you had left, right? They're encroaching even more on your sovereignty, encroaching more on your freedom, disempowering you more, making you more dependent, making you more of a slave to the state. This is no small thing whatsoever, as I've discussed in previous audios. So the reason why they'd want to disseminate this image of just people wearing masks all over the place and constantly bombard you with it on a daily basis is to normalize it and to get you to not critically think about what it actually represents, what it actually means. It actually represents a medical mandate, which then, of course, is now being transitioned and escalated to talk of vaccine mandates, right? Vaccine identification, certification necessary for travel, entry to school and business and et cetera, employment. And this all started with acceptance of the medical mandate. That was the precedent being set by the mask mandate. And so in order for that precedent to get set, in order for it to be accepted, they had to bombard everybody with imagery of it to, along with actual propagandists spewing propaganda and on news agencies and such, and magazines, articles, and so on, talking badly about anyone resisting, and just talking about how it's such a good and normal thing, and how you're helping the elderly, and propaganda verbally like that as well, of course. You have to just be bombarded by all this constantly to convince you that it's totally legit, it's totally fine, when in reality it's not legitimate at all. The premise that the state owns your body is not legitimate at all. Preemptive attack in the name of safety is not legitimate at all. They can't control your body because you may possibly make someone sick. That's not legitimate. Saying that you have to take a test, also not legitimate. It's another preemptive attack. And it's also presupposing that the test is legitimate and that they are angelic and would not give false test readings for any reason, and also assuming that whatever they decide to be the necessary mandated treatment is also going to be perfectly fine, right? Again, this is getting back to the statist psychology that I discussed, the idolatry, which is naivete. It's just totally naive thinking that these folks, that people in positions of great power are just saints on the earth. So one thing that can help you determine whether a conspiracy theory has likely validity or not is looking for specific red flags. And I've actually already mentioned these red flags. And the main one being whether it's actually pushing something that's violent. And it may not appear violent at first, and you may not be able to recognize that form of abuse taking place if you don't have a correct ethical lens to view the world, right? If you're not able to recognize that controlling someone's body against their will is an act of violence, and you're not able to recognize that a medical mandate is a form of that, then you're not going to see that red flag, right? But if you are able to recognize that connection, you will recognize it as actually an evil thing going on, which again fits into the definition of conspiracy, right? People joining together secretly with an agenda to actually put forward an evil action. So same with the smart city agenda, right? It's again taking away your freedoms, taking away your ability to choose, and further removing you from nature, further disconnecting you from the planet Earth, which can actually empower you through connection with it in a proper way, namely veganic homesteading, in a community of other folks doing the same thing. So it's actually further restriction of your life, further control, which is violence. So both of these agendas are actually fundamentally violent due to the mandatory nature of them. That's always been the main problem with all of these, healthcare precautions, as people just want to whitewash it as. It's not just a precautionary measure if it's a mandate. The problem is the mandates, whether it's mandating you to live in this, so-called utopian smart city, or whether it's mandating you to obey authorities as far as medical decisions. So it's really not that complicated. The truth is very clear to see, actually, once your morality is straight, once you have correct ethics, once you recognize violence is bad, violence is an evil, right? It's a form of abuse. Preemptive attack is just another form of violence. So it's still just evil. And so there can be no agenda to make the better world, there can be no agenda to make the world a better place if it's based on evil, if it's fundamentally an evil agenda, right? Those are contradictory. Evil agenda, versus good agenda that really does want to make the world a better place. You can't make the world a better place through evil. So that's why these agendas truly are nefarious and should be rejected. So don't be so trusting, look more deeply, recognize that you are being bombarded by propaganda and conditioning on a daily basis to get you to go along with an evil agenda that is actually not in your best interest. So I hope you found that interesting, and thank you for listening.